Welcome, everyone, back to this episode of Awaken Your Inner Genius. Here we are in Unit 3, Lesson 11. We have our panel here with us, Jim and Jackie Porter, John Bonzel, Ken Pearson. Between these four alone, we have over almost 200 years of experience right here on the screen. I am thrilled to be here as your facilitator here this evening. And so here we are at August 18th, and it's hard to believe we're now inching our way to the end of our third unit. And so we wanted to start off with just a quick meditation. We've got a big lesson here today, so I'd like to invite everybody to tune in to our ocean sounds. Just close your eyes for a minute and get centered and present in this moment. No matter where you are in the world, may you simply tune in to this universal heartbeat. You can hear the 1-2 pulse. Feeling that universal heartbeat, feeling your own heartbeat, tuning in. Breathing in deeply, breathing out. And becoming centered in this moment of stillness, inviting in the light that you will receive everything that you need to know for this lesson here this evening. May you relax your hold as you're breathing in and out deeply. Relax your hold on any expectations that you might have. Simply tune into the vibration of love. Feeling the magnificence of this universal heartbeat. Knowing that if your path and our paths have crossed here in this moment, whether you are in the future or with us here this evening, there is a reason for that. It is our great honor and privilege and joy to be here this evening to dive into Lesson 11. When you are ready, feel free to open your eyes and become centered back here to this moment. So here we are. And I'm thrilled to have everyone on our panel. If you all would unmute yourselves here today. I wanted just to remind us that this is kind of a special broadcast for me, Kimberly Faith. It was 3 years ago tomorrow that I first walked into the Russell Museum.
That's right.
So I've been calling this on my calendar, my museum anniversary. But John, this was the very first time 3 years ago that we crossed paths, and look how far we've come.
Yes, Kimberly, we are celebrating a 3-year anniversary, unlike you and Ken only celebrating a 1-year anniversary.
It's going to give him a little bit of a hard time. Well, so
boy, he's pushing it, man. He's pushing it. Because I'm going to come at him with it's quality, not quantity, pal. I got way more quality than you got.
So little did I know that we're going there. I was really sincerely celebrating the fact that was the first time I'd ever heard of Walter and Leah Russell and how it changed the course of my life, and how thrilled I am to know that all this time later, after I met John, I then shortly thereafter met Jim and Jackie, and then shortly thereafter met my lovely magnetic partner here, Ken. And it's just amazing how one decision to walk in through the doors of a museum, that someone hands me a brochure, and look how far we've come. And isn't that the case for all of us, how one decision can be life-changing?
Absolutely.
Yep. Your whole life can change in one day, man. One day, your whole life can change. I look forward to that all the time.
So everyone who is here with us, perhaps it's this decision for you to join us here on the home study course. There's a reason why you're here with us. And despite all the changes in the world, what I find, John, as I was thinking about going back to this 3 years, you were that first day I left there with the home study course under my arm, and a stack of books, including my little cosmic clock box of light, prism light. I totally walked out of there. John is quite the consummate salesperson when he was passionately speaking about the work. And I spend months studying this home study course for the first time around. And I couldn't help but think of just how powerful it is for so many of us. And so for many people, it starts with The Man Who Tapped, which you can certainly find a copy there at our sales link there below, and also the home study course. And so, Ken, I wanted to start with you here this evening because when we're over here and you and I really kind of prep and when we're planning these things together on page 203, lesson 11, I was going to ask James to pull up that title, and I was wondering if you could read that and comment before we get started, because that's a pretty big title for lesson 11.
Yeah. Yes, higher knowledge continued through the mystery of gravity. We continue to prepare you for a comprehension of sex polarity, which is really interesting because I think it was Mr. Bonzel 2 weeks ago brought up that the sex polarity created gravity, and that, you know, what it's going to explain in here is how that the pistons of duality are created from the polarities of male, female, and that happens on all levels of life. So I think it's good. There's so much good stuff to come, and don't be afraid, again, of the explanations. It's going to be so simple as we go through this, as Mr. Bonzo stated and Jim has stated. If you can count from 0 to 9, and you can know the secrets of the universe. You know, that's the extent of it. That's how it will get no more complicated than that, quite frankly.
And so, John, what was that comment that you said Doc often says? If you can read
and count to 9, you can master the secrets of the universe. So that's what we need our audience to hold on to, because it's going to get deep.
Yeah.
But don't let it overwhelm. Just kind of go with it, you know, absorb what you can, right?
Well, that is something that I learned. Rita, her comment already says, hello all, I found this unit fascinating. And fascinating it is, Rita. Fascinating it is. And so what I found through the home study course my first time through is that if I would continue to just simply have the faith, pun intended, to know that at a deep soul level, I did understand these teachings, that not to get my human mind hung up. And so, John, as we're going into it here, how I really was a bit divided, pun intended also, about how we begin to dive into this particular subject. And so what I'm thinking is that we ought to start with that last sentence on page 203 and read through the top of 204 before we get to the highlighted section. So can you start with that one? First comes the necessity.
Yes, I can. All right. First comes the necessity of fully comprehending the pattern indicated by the words, the undivided, and I'll add God, the divided, which is the physical universe, and the united, back to God. The undivided means the uncreated, changeless qualities of God's eternal equilibrium. As explained in greater detail in later units, it means the undivided white light of cause, which constitutes the spiritual universe of rest. The divided means the sex pairs of male and female bodies, which constitute the gravity pressure universe of motion. It means created quantities of effect. The very first step.
Let me ask you, John, before we go into this next paragraph, because that's a big paragraph, would it help to show the image of the undivided and the divided?
Yes.
Of course.
All right, so
and if I could just make a comment, for people to understand, if they would associate male with the red side of the light spectrum, the red, the orange, the infrared, and then the female side of the light spectrum with the blue and the greens and the ultraviolet, that will help them understand that all there is light, and there's the simulation of the two pairs of those lights interacting with each other that give us what we think is the universe. So if that would help them just kind of associate, you know, male with that color, female with that color, and
Well, James is going to pull up the prism image here. So can you walk us through and help everybody understand this based on what you just said before we go into that next paragraph?
Yes. So if you see the white light coming in from the left, right? So there's God, undivided, right? You really can't see it, but we're just using that. And then coming out from that prism. So no matter where you are on this planet, no matter where you are in the universe, that sequence of colors never, ever changes. And you can see the yellow is kind of like the equilibrium point. That's the centering point. And the two pairs, male and female, are on either side of that yellow line. And that's all there is. And it's the interaction, compression, expansion, and cycles, and speed of cycles and wavelengths and so on. And that's all there is. You know, you can just take it and keep complicating it. But if you just understand those basics, it'll take you as far as you need.
All right.
One thing I want to add to that I really like about that is think of a projector in a movie theater. And think of God as the white light that projects, and the colors as the film that the light is projected through, to realize, and that's what John means, that everything is light. It's just an illusion. It's a mirrored image on a screen. We call it a three-dimensional screen. In a movie theater, you call it a two-dimensional screen. But it's the same principle. That without that white light, we got no movie. We got no imagery. We got no motion.
You got nothing.
You got what, man?
All right. So, Jim, why don't you chime in?
Before even undivided anymore.
I find this image incredibly powerful. I want to say hello to everybody. Hi, Terry and Rita and Deborah. We've got Linda and Karen and Deb and Anika. And also from Macedonia, student of 2 years, thrilled. Please put your comments and your questions. And we do want to invite you all to please put your questions in the chat box as we go along, because we are going to take questions as we come along. So as we continue to integrate that, if you have questions from the last lesson or as we go into this one, this is a big one. And there is my mom, Diane. I'm sending you love, Mom, on the call as well. And so I find it very powerful. So Jim, why don't you chime in I'm going to have this image on the screen for a little bit longer, and then I'm going to have us go to that next paragraph on page 205. And I'll read that as I ask you all to comment.
Okay, so if you look where John pointed out the white light of God, which we can only know, we can't see. That's purity. That's the universal one. That's the undivided. And he also rightfully pointed out the divided on the other side. What we want to keep in mind is that, and I hammer this, I know, relentlessly, that the feminine, masculine exists in male and female. They're almost at the balancing point, but one slightly exceeds the other one in the female, and one slightly exceeds the other in the male. And this is where the pull to our male and female natures draws us together into matehood, to reproduce and repopulate the world. That division line in the yellow, that's why our sun looks yellow. We all know, to an illumined being, it's pure white light, but it looks yellow to us because that's what our spectrum can cover. The thing, I know I'm not doing it, is to try not to complicate this.
Right.
The universal one divides itself into the illusion of multiplicity, as Ken said, and that illusion becomes our reality when we're embodied. It gives us the ability to experience existence in multiple forms and shapes. And all of us here are experiencing our own individual journey in existence in body. And it's both a wonderful and amazing thing, and at times absolutely terrifying.
Okay, Jackie, anything you want to add, or I'm going to jump on to that next paragraph?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so if any of you that are new students, so as you go into here, I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to ask John to comment. The very first step towards higher comprehension is your discovery and realization that the divided effect has within it the undivided cause. Now, this is a big sentence. So should I stop there, John, before I continue?
No, go ahead, finish it, and then we'll pull it together.
Okay. The uncreated is always within the created. Everybody breathe with me. Those of you that are new, this is a new way of listening, a new language, but I want you to know that you deep down, you already know these things. The uncreated is always within the created. The spiritual always centers and controls the physical.
Which
The
is another
eternal
way of saying the fire things. Sorry.
Okay. The eternal invisible white light balances and dominates the transient visible spectrum divided light. This is the most important for anyone who seeks higher knowledge to understand. John, do I keep going or stop there?
Yeah, let's stop it right there.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's pretty big.
So what the Russells are doing, they're just simply re-emphasizing basically cause and effect, God, the undivided, motionless, the all-knowing, and then the divided, which is motion, which is creation as we sense it and understand it. So there is a quote from the Divine Iliad, and I know Ken can do it verbatim, but I'm going to quote this one. I am within all things centering them. I am without all things controlling them, but I am not those things. So gravity is that tool that God uses.
All right, we're going to go to the panel so we can see describe this, John.
Right, to bring light into being and then take it out of being, out of our sensed range. And that sequence, back and forth. That's all there is. So, we don't need to overcomplicate it. Look over Ken's left shoulder. Look at that wave painting. It's magnificent. Ken, remember yesterday you were talking about the detail within that octave wave, and we were looking at other things. And so for people to know that the title of that painting is In the Wave Lies the Secret to Creation. So the color sequence, no matter where you go, wherever you look, it is the same.
All right, so
And
don't
what
go
I like,
too deep.
Mr. Bonzo points out one more thing, love, is John always points out the rainbow. And when he says it's the same thing, look at a rainbow and you'll see those exact colors. And when and John pointed this out to me, and I didn't know, when you see a double rainbow, you'll see the same colors, but in verse.
Here.
So they'll be reversed. Yeah, but the exact same formulation and elements are the exact same order form.
All right. So what's really fascinating, let's pause for a minute, because what I want to say, having talked with so many leaders all these years, is that humanity really does struggle with this idea of cause and effect. So before I go there, take a look. Tell them a little bit about this wave painting, Jim.
Well, it is literally the divided. I have a painting, and I think you guys have copies of it now too, where we literally take the Russell chart of elements and set it in a translucent and set on top of that, and it matches it perfectly. That is the light spectrum that our sense range at this time in human history can perceive. Now, prior to this, in ancient history, there's colors there that we did not yet perceive. Now we can perceive this full spectrum, and eventually, as we evolve into a more illumined state, we will see colors beyond these. But they will all be variants of these primary basic colors within the wave. So that is literally a picture of what's going on around us universally and in our own individual lives at a constant, us moving through that wave spectrum.
Now, John, I'm going to ask you to tell everyone when Dr. Russell painted this, but before they do, everybody else, I know some of you are gifted with the ability to see people and see the colors around people. Feel free to be able to post that, because part of why this Homesteady course is so important is because it will give you the foundation to understand the greater science that we are getting into. But for someone who's never heard of this before or never seen this painting before, John, what do they need to know about it?
They need to know that in Dr. Russell's grand illumination in 1921, he was shown the secrets of the universe. So this particular painting was the very first scientific drawing that Dr. Russell did to exemplify the wave, the construction of matter, the deconstruction of matter, male, female. And what I also wanted to point it out, I thought Jim might have done this, but if you look at this painting, you'll see that on the right-hand side, and you see the equilibrium there, line of inertia, and then the red is penetrating the blue. And then what happens is there's the inverse. So the male becomes the female becomes the male, and that cycle is forever. And that's all there is that sequence right there. That's it. So don't overcomplicate it, right? You got 4 pairs of rings, and we'll get into all that later on in the science, but just kind of allow yourself to know male, female, blue, red, and we'll go easy here and we'll walk everybody through it.
Well, so I want to pause for a moment because, first of all, for those of you that want a copy of this poster, you can order it at philosophy.org. And for anybody who wants to ever come see it, you can see it, the original wave painting, at the Waynesboro, Virginia Museum. But I want to mention just how powerful it was when I first saw it. So if we'll go to the panel, James, when I first saw this painting, I mean, when you think back to 1921, there was Dr. Russell trying to figure out how in the world am I going to show humanity. They didn't have Photoshop. They didn't have, all the computer simulations. He had to do it with paint. And when you think about how profound that was for him to sit down and have that memory from the divine to be able to paint that, it really is spectacular. Would you say so, Ken?
Yeah, not only that, he had to decode that painting and use academic scientific terms to tell you what it means. I mean, right? So you look at it and you think, wow, that's pretty, but there's, as Jim said, what Jim was referring to when he put that over is that clock behind me, that cosmic clock. You put that right over that painting, and all of those lines line up, the centering poles and all those things line up to that cosmic clock. So that was put on top of that. And that's how magical it is and how many layers that we're looking at. But again, if you think about it, and John just said it best, think of it as male is red and female is blue. And once you have those 2 color ratios into the male-female aspect, you start to realize that everything is male and female, and you can kind of tell what's blue and what's red by what Kimberly said with your inner eyes, not your outer eyes, not your sensed eyes, but your inner eyes will tell you what's male and what's female. And thus you start to look at the pistons of life. Even now, remember this, rocks, so mineral, vegetable, and animal all have male, female counterparts. Everything is a sexual polarity. Even rocks have a male, female counterpart.
All right, so we're going to go there, but I'm going to try to back up for just a moment. So I want to bring something up. Many of us have now become aware that the matrix, this 3D world that some call it that we live in, is inverted. And so I want to bring something up. I was just at Tesla Tech with Ken and James and Karen, who will be with us next week. And one of the discussions is they said that they felt the Russell work was so powerful because it made things correct that used to be inverted. And so let me tie this into what they're saying here. We have been all brought up to believe that the male is blue and the female is red or pink. Look at all the baby gender reveals. Look at how we've been taught, when in fact that is an inversion of the truth according to the science that we'll be talking about here within the Russell work. Yes, Jackie.
I just wanted to inject that because how I deal with that, I look at that is when a girl is born, she needs some of that male energy. So she's red. And then when the boy is born of the red spectrum, he needs a little bit of blue. So well, it balances out that way. That's how I deal with that situation.
Well, that is an unwiring for us all, though. I mean, because when we think about it, I mean, you guys aren't on TikTok and some of the social media, but everywhere you turn, there are gender reveals pushing this notion of pink for girls, blue for boys. And so what we're talking about here is righting that inversion. Is that a fair way to say it, John?
Yes.
Well, and also remember, guys, like a woman likes a man in blue. So the color of blue is in the woman, not the man. And a man likes a woman in red. And the reason is because that color of red is symbolic. So men don't necessarily wear red dresses or red suits, but a woman wearing a red dress is considered very regal and beautiful and gown. And a man in blue, I've noticed that with women. And also we live in a world where somehow we've been convinced that opposites attract. So that really, when you really break that down in physics or just a bar magnet, it's a lot. Opposites repel, like attracts. So in that matehood world, if you are out there shopping for a mate, you're looking for yourself in a male or female version. That's the secret. It's not like a mystery anymore. Once you know yourself, you'll know exactly what your mate looks like. That's what. So opposites do not attract.
All right, so there's a lot more in here, and I'm going to keep us going. John, I know you have things to say, but I want to bring up Deborah's comment before I have us go back to the paragraph. So Deborah says, beyond the blue and the red, do the individual color frequencies represent specific aspects in the visible world? So she's asking this within context of the Russell work. If you can answer that question, but I know there's a lot of other work that would say some certain things. So John, what would you say?
How about if we just say we'll just kind of nod our head yes?
How about beyond that you cannot go? Right? Except in between there, but those are the bookends, aren't they? Red and blue.
Yes.
Simple,
guys. Here on the carbon octave, at the present level of man's evolution.
Okay, you're right.
All right, the fourth octave from and Dr. Russell's wave cycle is carbon. We exist and live on the carbon octave. This is the range of colors that we can see in this octave. Now, if you went to previous octaves and you went to octaves beyond us, remember, they are also divided and uniting in the process of dividing and uniting. So they also have bodies, and there's also intelligent beings living at those different octaves. We'll get into that later. They see ranges of color that we do not. That's why I brought up, we know historically from a couple of thousand years ago that there were colors that could not be seen by the Roman people in general. They couldn't see them, that we now see because we have evolved our ability to see a broader color range than we did at that. Remember, they were us, than we did at that time period. So we're evolving a broader color range, but it's always going to be the basic male-female spectrum that we're dealing with, whether you're on the first octave or the ninth octave. I think that just to simplify for the people that are on the Christian side of things, this is what Jesus said, in my Father's house there are many mansions. He's talking about the 9-octave wave cycle, many mansions. And what's he do? He said, I go there because as a Christ-conscious being, he lived and knew all octaves. And he says, I go there before you to prepare a place for you. So your thoughts and your frequency will either lock you to this octave or a prior octave or a higher octave. It's just that's the evolutionary scale we live on. And that's the simplicity actually of the science. You're an evolving being that has evolved from the first octave to now the fourth octave, and you will eventually evolve and live on the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th. John disagrees with this, but I'm pretty sure that's correct.
All right. Well, there's plenty of discussion. I want to remind everybody, we're only on unit 3 of a 12-unit home study course. So yes. I want you all just to breathe for a minute. So before we take a break, I think it's really important for us to land the first part of that paragraph. And I want to go back because while these folks talk about this stuff all the time, the rest of humanity does not. It says the realization that the divided effect has within it the undivided cause. So here are one of the blind spots that I actually see in humanity. Humanity has a terrible understanding, a very distorted understanding of cause and effect. We barely understand that if we stuff our face with cream puffs, that we're going to gain 20 pounds in a couple of weeks. I mean, so this cause and effect thing is very difficult for people. So the undivided cause, John, is that white light that's coming in from God, correct?
That is correct.
Cause. Okay. And so the divided effect, the effect of what it is that we see in physicality, that was all of the spectrum of light. That is the divided effect, meaning that we see it. Correct?
That is correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Woo, I feel like I just won some Russell bingo. Okay, so dear light, here's the thing.
Thanks for simplifying it, Jim.
When
we're going to give you a free man who tap.
So with cause and effect, what happens the more we go into this home study course, my dear friends, the ones that are listening, these Russell students will start throwing around these things, because what happens is they start building this tapestry of creation, which is so much stinking fun, can I just say? But if you don't get the mechanics and slow down on the mechanics, you can lose what they're talking about later. So we just landed this issue of that red is the masculine and blue is the feminine. We just landed the divided effect and the undivided cause. And so please have that centered. If you need to write that down, do. We've timed for our first break. So what I'm going to say to the panel is, you know how much more we have to cover. I'm going to try to keep us pure as we are moving right along. This is our time for our first 3-minute break. It matters not if you understand that at the human level right now. Just breathe through it, relax, shake your hands, stand up, get some oxygen. We'll see you in 3 minutes. All right, if you're close, we'll leave that quote on the screen for just a moment. The quote that was on the screen, it says, remember also that the undivided is still, while the divided pairs are always in motion. And I think that's very, very powerful quote for us to have centered here. Yeah. So part of, as we get ready to go back to that paragraph, I want to give my team heads up. I'm going to have us finish that paragraph that we were on in 204, and then I'm going to have us jump ahead to 206. But
all right, Kim, before you do, I'm sorry. Before you do, before we get started, Jackie would like to address Deb Token.
Deb, she was saying that the color spectrum aligns with the chakras, and yes, they do.
There's much to be said for that. So now as we go into this, what's important, I'm going to continue reading this particular paragraph and ask for any commentary before we go on and jump ahead over here to page 206. So James, if we could scroll down just a little bit, I'm going to start right after where that blue highlight was. Therefore, we must use every effort for you to understand it. So let's go back to the parable regarding that something in music, which you could hear, but that Toscanini could hear better than you could hear. That something is uncreated, the undivided spiritual idea that exists within the physical simulation of idea, which your physical body cannot hear until spiritual awareness of the presence of the creator within you unfolds. I'm going to ask John to comment on that, but first I want to bring to everyone's attention, pay special attention in your home study course to whenever things are all capitalized. You know, they didn't have all the opportunities to bold and like we do and make fonts bigger. So the only way they could add emphasis was to underscore and to put it in capitalized words. So John, what does this mean to someone?
What it means is this, is that when you are ready, you will receive that which you desire. So what they're saying here about Toscanini in his musical composition, so he's hearing that something, what the Russells highlight, that something. So that something is the silence in between the notes. That's what he's hearing. But he's hearing it spiritually, not physically. And then spiritually, he's bringing it into the physical world by writing it down, by putting it in notes and so on. And is his interpretation. But the key word there is simulation. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, John.
Simulation of idea, right? Remember, idea never leaves mind. But the simulation of that idea is brought into the physical.
All right. So what about, so Toscanini created beautiful music, but what about some of us that actually have a song in our heart that we feel from a very spiritual basis that we sing, sometimes externally or sometimes internally, but we can feel that music and hear it with our inner ears and and see it with our inner eyes that no one else sees. Isn't that a parallel of those of us that don't necessarily aren't writing masterful music, but we're living masterful music?
Yes, it's a communion. It's like a meditation. It is.
It's like you resonate with whatever notes are coming from that in that particular order, and you're inspired by it.
When I was a young man in my 30s, life was in full measure, we'll just say active, raising children, single income so that Jackie could stay home with the kids because we homeschooled, and it was hectic and my days were long, and I would find myself distracted immensely by the physical realities of the day-to-day. What would save me from that is many, many nights of each week. I would come home, I would sit down, and I would put my favorite piece of all time for me is Beethoven's Ninth Ode to Joy. And I would play that. And I would start off listening to Ode to Joy. But as it progressed, I was talking one-on-one with Creator. That's that stillness within that they're talking about.
John, you want to comment? And then I have a story to share that happened at Tesla Tech last week.
Well, I was going to try to establish the difference. So what you were describing, the sequence is the same. Okay, but the frequency, and you've heard me use the term the river of thought. Okay, so the river of thought has various frequencies in it. So when someone brings, now the creative process is the same, but for me, my understanding, classical music, the different eras of classical music, it's a different higher frequency in the river of thought, and those that can hear it and interpret it bring it into being. So, whatever it is that you're hearing and whatever you're whistling and whatever you're singing to yourself, but the sequence, the process is the same.
And Jackie has this experience a lot, Kim, what you're talking about, where she literally hears music out of the ethers.
I do too.
Well, I think we all have when you hear a fan running and you're sitting still and quiet, and all of a sudden this melody comes from the wind and the turning of the blade, or maybe something else in the background that's coming together, and it creates music. It's kind of the same thing, it's just more on a physical thing, but you tap into that source of what's being created in your head. It could be different for everybody.
Okay. Much to say about that. So I was having a conversation with someone. Ken, you have a thought, and then I'll share my story.
No, go ahead. Share your story, love.
It's just that, what happens with many of us when our gifts are coming online and we can tap more into the higher levels of the river of life, John, that you were referring to. The more you begin to open up, I like to even call it the cosmic aperture personally, but the more you get into it, you begin to understand things at a different level. And so I had someone who was at that level where she had not even meditated before. And she pulled me aside because she says, I feel like there's something you can tell me and you can share with me. And I'm very drawn to the Russell work, but I don't understand why. And my first conversation with her was about the power of meditation and how important it was. And she says, I've tried it. I can't get to that still point. And we were talking about the power of music to be able to take her to a place like that. So for me, music is, I believe that, like you have on the top of that cosmic clock behind you, the grand symphony of creation. I believe creation is a symphony and music is the divine gateway.
Well, music is an embodiment. And what did John quote earlier? I am within all things, centering them. Yes, you can find the divine in music.
There's levels. What we're going to read about too is the levels of music. We all start out with that barbaric stage, and then we evolve. The evolution is we go from a chaotic 1/16 beat to a waltz, which is a 1-2-3 beat. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the lesson, but we all unfold naturally. If you think back to caveman days and they were just playing the drums, that was because it stimulated the body. So it's still, remember though, the music, the person creating the sound had to hear something, had to feel something in order for it, and they had to collect that. Even though it was a physical expression stimulating the physical body, it had to be collected from that pool of all music, where all music exists. It all exists in one idea.
Wow, very powerfully said. So James, let's go ahead and skip over here to page 206 because we've got a big lesson here ahead of us, and feel free to write down any of your questions as you go along. Or else just let it drink it in. So I'm going to go to that paragraph. It says, whenever Jesus referred to the Father, he meant that uncreated source, notice source is all capitalized, of all things, which we are now referring to as that something which all spiritually unfolding people are discovering in every physical manifestation as they arise above its physical nature, such as we exemplified in the simple example of the uncreated element in music, which Ken was just referring to, which is within the created sound that manifests the uncreated idea. So if we'll scroll down a little bit, Jesus meant by the word Father, the light of mind, all capitalized M, which God is. The use of the word Father has helped to build the concept of a personal man-shaped God. But that is because his people, most all of ours, were not ready for it. In essence, however, here comes the really, really powerful line from me. He was endeavoring to impress upon people that the Creator was ever present in the created. So I want to ask the panel if they'll comment on that. The Creator was ever present in the created.
That's the
Well,
that's. Go ahead, John.
Go, Jim, and then we'll go to John.
I was just going to say, I was hoping, Kimberly, you would go ahead and just finish that paragraph.
I can, which is the same in meaning as Krishna's words, the undivided is present in the divided. Both were endeavoring to tell man where to find God, but man had not unfolded sufficiently to even grasp the edge of their meaning.
What's beautiful about this paragraph, and I'm sorry to interrupt you there, Jimmy, is that here you have two Christ-like beings that are saying the exact same thing. There's no variance to it. The wording, Krishna was 1,000 or 2,000 years before Christ, and both using the same terms, the undivided, within, and that will never change as long as there is existence. So if you can, I'm saying this to our audience, if you can grasp that concept now, It will carry you forever.
Wow. How powerful.
Hey,
Jim, you wanted to add to that?
Jim, you
Go
were
ahead,
going to
Ken.
say something?
Yeah, I was just
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go,
That's
Jim, and then Ken.
I was just pointing out what everyone is saying is that the one true reality is the universal one is eternal. The seemingly true and a little bit more difficult to grasp is the physical embodiment, though it too is eternal. It's eternally in motion. And anything that is eternally in motion is an illusion of the true reality. The true reality is our divine self. The illusion is the divide itself. But the illusion is there so that we can manifest our divine self through the illusionary body self. So each has its function and purpose, and each are both eternal in their presence. Otherwise, Russell says at the very beginning of the Universal One, in essence, nothing begins or is created or ends. It evolves. It's a constant evolution. Constant creating. It's a constant evolution, and so that's why we're trying to get in touch with that divine side of ourselves, inside ourselves. That because when we reach that, then we know how to become masters of the physical universe and manifest divinity through ourselves.
All right, Ken.
Yeah, I want to go back to this part of here where, Jesus meant by the word Father, the light of mind, which is God. And we as mankind mistakenly that God was a male. And in order for God to be undivided, God must be male and female. Therefore, there is no division. So mother, father is one. And that's a hard concept, but it really makes a lot of sense if you start thinking of course, God has to be mother and father. God couldn't just be one because then God would be limited. In order for God to not be limited, God has to be both. And also God has to be wholeness everywhere, undividable, right? So therefore, everything that comes from God is a divided concept. But God in God's self and God in yourself is undivided. That's why I always say, go look in a mirror and point to where you're at in that mirror and that body. If you can point to where you're at in your body in the mirror, where is that person, Kimberly, or where is Jim, or where is John, or where's Jackie? If you go look in the mirror, you can't point to I'm over here, and I'm in my left arm, I'm in my right arm. And most people, when you ask that question, will say, well, I'm measureless. I'm everywhere. So we all do have that knowing of where we are the source of the undivided, and that we're just an extension now. Ideally, in the creation, the idea of creation is to find our God self as a supreme goal of every human being on this plane, in this three-dimensional unreality, the canvas we get to paint on. Each of us is a creator. That's why we are all so powerful. We're all centered by all presence, all knowledge, and all power. So, when you think about that for a second, in order for God to be God or any creation to be of God, we all must have the same magnitude of God within us. We are all geniuses. We are all brilliant musicians and painters, and we can all master the arts. That was the whole message of the Russell cosmogony, is to awaken that genius within all of us. And that's what it means to undivided. Within every human being is that undivided spirit light of God. And we're not talking about luminosity. There's a difference between the light of God and luminosity. That's what John was talking about. When you're seeing that white light, that's luminosity. That is not the light of God. The light of God is constant. My girl's saying I'm blowing it up. Okay, I'll stop there.
No, I wasn't. I was talking about the light of the luminosity. That's what I was showing, the luminosity.
Yeah, no, because we can get confused. So to me, it also is very important. I went through a period of time, I would say maybe 15, 20 years ago, where I had to get in touch with the female side of God because I had realized I was praying to a male God and I wanted to know more. I was hurting and I wanted some feminine energy and I wasn't with anybody. So at that time I had to try and access it, and I did access it through God and the female side of God, which is just beautiful. And as Jim was saying about we all have male and female within us. We do. But I don't think that we really get to experience the other half. Like I'm male. So for me, being in love with my girl over here, Kimberly, I have had something happen where I get to be more in touch with my feminine side by being in love than I did when I was in and of myself. And that's something that we'll get further into as we go along. But that's what it means that we all have that male, female inside within us. I believe.
All right. Go ahead, John. And then I have a practical question for the panel.
I wanted to point out to everyone that what's essential about this stage of what we're talking about here is that you have an opportunity here to not be guided and led by the physical and the body to where it predominates your thinking, your actions, and everything you do in life. Whereas now you can grasp that you, as the creator, you're the one that controls through your thinking, through your thoughts of what the physical will be instead of the physical dominating. So this is where you need to kind of focus and say, okay, yep, I am that God entity.
Yep.
And you can create your own destiny however you want. But if you relent and let the body take over, right, it will take you as deep into the physical as you want to go.
So there's a question here. I don't know if it should be John. I was wondering if Kimberly can answer this. So what is water in the divided, and how do consciousness fit into the undivided and divided? But I would just say, what is water in the divided?
I'm going to throw this to Jim and John right quick, and then I have a practical question for the entire panel. So what is the answer to that one, John?
She says, what is water in the divided?
H2O.
Water in the divided is water. That's a no-brainer.
Keep going.
And how do consciousnesses fit in the undivided and the divided? Consciousness is God, the undivided light, the creator. Okay? And it is the cause of the divided. And remember, the creator is, we just talked about this 2 paragraphs ago. The creator is always within, the undivided is always within the divided. It's that simple. I'm not quite sure what Karen is asking about. So what is water?
I think she's talking about H2O, John. H2O, hydrogen and oxygen. Is that not what water is? It's duality. It's 2 elements. It's just one.
I think Leo spoke of, people, psychologists and stuff get into the subconscious or superconscious, when really there is only consciousness and unconsciousness. So when you're in the divided and you're not conscious, you're just unconscious and going where the senses are taking you. When you practice meditation, that your ability to hold on to that consciousness of the undivided becomes more clear, and you can snap yourself into it more quickly than you can if something goes wrong. You're thinking of solutions instead of thinking how miserable it is. Just little things like that. It's like an unconscious consciousness thing. It's always there, but we just have to be in it and practice being in it. So
I noticed something that I think there are a lot of answers to this that we could do, but I did notice something at Tesla Tech that I found quite profound. There are a number of people who are working with water on this planet to elevate the consciousness of water. And they say the more purified our water can become, the more it can help our consciousness and our ability to connect, because so many things have been tainted. Now, I only bring this up because I saw how much love people were pouring into their projects and new modalities around water. And that's what impressed me. There were some people who were feeling incredibly led to send positive energy to bodies of water around the world, to purify the water that everyone's drinking, with an interest at up-leveling the consciousness. And John, I've heard you say many times there's no ritual, modality or anything that can actually take us to the divine. And I completely get that. But what I was impressed with was the amount of love. I think everyone right now in different facets are feeling the need to express that consciousness in different ways. And for some, it was through this elevation of water.
Well, love is how you perceive total consciousness. So you're dead on there. Look, water is a matter. Go ahead. Water is an element
Yes.
It's a primary element on this octave. It's in and around everything. It takes many forms. It can be etheric and gaseous. It can be liquid, and it can be solid. It's a remarkable recorder of what happens in thoughts and patterns. And that Japanese gentleman, I forget his name right now, Yamoto, did a wonderful job on that. And if they're experimenting further and showing you the effect of thoughts on water, keep in mind those your thoughts have effect on everything. It's just easily record in the crystallization of water.
Yes. Yes.
So it's a wonderful concept. What you think counts.
Well, and so anybody who hasn't studied Dr. Emoto's work, I would encourage you to look that up, because what the experiments that he and many others have since done is to actually say words to water and then record the crystalline formation that would come. And it's riveting work. So Dr. Emoto, Emoto, I believe. Yep. And before we get to Deborah's comment there, yes, John. And then I really do have a question for the panel. I'm trying hard to get there.
Yeah, we would just
Go ahead,
stop.
John.
Well, I feel as though I need to kind of correct our panel here. There is nothing in the physical. There's nothing in water that's going to get you closer to God. I don't give a damn how many times you purify it, how many times you vaporize it and condense it. There is nothing in the physical that will get you closer to God. God,
we're not saying that. Yeah, we're not saying that, John. We're saying that water is one of the easiest things to experiment with, where you can see the effect of thought on physical reality. That's all we're saying. Water is an element. I understand that. You understand that. But
God centers everything. The undivided centers the divided, guys. Yes. Come on, God's got to be centering that water.
All right. So let's have a little panel throwdown, shall we? Let me go first. So
all right.
All right. So I've heard John say a million times that there's nothing you can do, ritual, product, modality, yada, all into that can get you to God. I totally get that. And yet we see humans. That's why I brought up the fact that what I saw was love. It wasn't about the water. It was about the expression of love. And their expression of love to express in that physicality of water. That's what I saw was the magic behind many of the people that I saw doing this work. So I get that. Mm-hmm. There is no other physical that can get us there. But I do believe that we are here to express love. Are we not, John?
Yes. And I get that part, right? They're lovingly trying to discover something and get closer to God. So if they want to purify water and it's a loving gesture on their part, great. But it ain't going to get them any closer to God, whether they purify the water or not. But the love principle is a given. That's a given.
Okay.
Yes.
So I want to be sure that we're clear about that. So let me go back to a practical question before we go into Deborah's question here, because I do have an answer for Deborah. So as I'm listening to all of you talk about this divinity and this understanding, James on our panel on site, he says, I kind of like the energy of this segment. It's a little bit good to have some tension here among the panel. That is okay. It's all said in love. But as I was listening to you all say these very, very big words, I had a moment of reflection today when I was going back to a time where I was very lost in this reality. And I felt that old lost version of myself pop up for a moment where I certainly didn't feel like the divine. Yeah. I certainly didn't feel like the divine. I certainly didn't feel like this physical embodiment was of the divine. And I could feel myself going down. And this has been something that's been done to women, especially, is us hating and disliking the physical embodiment that we're in. And so I want to talk just for a moment, if you all could speak practically to someone who is listening to this saying, I don't feel like I'm that divinity inside. I hear what you're saying. I hear you telling me that I am that embodiment. What would you say to them to let go of that unworthiness track, the programming that we've had, so that we can hear in our hearts what's being said here tonight? Who wants to
do everything with love. Do everything with love as your motivator. Try and do everything you can lovingly. That doesn't mean you're going to love everything you do, but try and put love into everything you do, because that is the manifestation of divinity, of the undivided, is to act, think, and feel from love. That's the supreme goal.
You know, there are people out there, and we all know it. We've all had those times in our lives, and the moment you want to start feeling sorry for yourself, just ask someone how their day's going, and if they open up to you, you'll hear the life that they had that makes yours look like a cakewalk. So we recognize that everyone's going through issues, and that everyone's going through family issues, community issues, world issues, and personal issues galore. But the key that we're all talking about and bouncing around is focus on being loving in all that you do. I'm not telling you to go out and be loving toward people that are not nice and loving back to you. You can love them without interacting with them. And I understand also there's people out there that are having to interact with friends and family and mates that are not very nice at times. And God bless you. You know, try to work your way out of it. But the key to it all is learning how to love through all circumstances, and forgive and love over and over again. And then, of course, try to remove yourself from a negative situation if you can. But through it all, love, just love.
Okay. So, John, speak to someone who is battling this. Oh, Jackie, go ahead, but speak to someone who's battling this unworthiness.
Well, I know personally for myself, when I get locked into looking for outside situations to prove I'm worthy, situations that would tell me whether what I do is approved, or I mean, I think a lot of it's from childhood, you know, upbringing and things. So these are things that are still in the physical. They're still in the mindset, the brain set. We have to get to mind, and that's through meditation. And when you can take that all-encompassing love and apply it to yourself, then you have something to give. Then you can give it out to somebody who's not really seeing the light in that moment. And you can inspire them with it. It's like a little fairy going around with their magic wand and touching them with love. But I think the hardest thing is to love yourself. And I know that's been a battle for me. Just, I guess, you know, upbringing. So it made it like I'm crawling out of quicksand all the time. Till I finally get out and think, well, that wasn't so bad. You know, having those moments of just consciousness, not dependent on anything outside of myself. It's like joy. It's like learning to live in the joy of uncertainty. Whatever happens, be joyful. And it's not always easy, but
Okay, thank
kind of the
you.
goal.
And John, what would you say to someone who was having those thoughts?
Here's what I would say to them, and Ken can relate to what I'm about to say because of the work that he's done, you know, with addiction and so on and so forth. The first thing that someone that is struggling is that you have got to repent / relent / surrender to a higher source, to a higher being. And until you do that, you, just like Leo said, that you can live either a purposeful life or a purposeless life. So until you surrender to that higher source and to that, and you realize that that higher source is you, you're going nowhere. You're like a cork on the ocean. Wherever the ocean takes you is where you're going. But once you make that commitment, once you turn yourself over to God, now you got something. Now you can live a purposeful life. You can control your life with your thinking and your thoughts. And it's a process, just like anything else. You know, it's just like trying to hit a baseball or a tennis ball or whatever it is, right? But until you turn over, give it over, let the ego go out the damn door and let God in, you're going nowhere.
Well said, John.
I would like to add one thought to that before we take a break and then answer Deborah's question. So I am not a huge fan of this word repent and surrender, but I instead get excited about the word invitation, where you invite in a greater understanding that's exactly what you said. that there is this beautiful, how exciting is it when you begin to understand the secrets of the universe and creation, that we are here to be creators and that we have the power to create our life, and that we can step into the joy and the fun and the partnership of the things that we're talking about. To me, that is an energy that beckons someone out of some of this that we've been beaten down with in the past 2,000 years. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
So we'll
Now, this is
continue
where
that
we go and,
conversation.
and we,
No, it does, my love. It does. It does good. That was good. That was good. That was good.
So we'll continue the conversation when we come back from our break. I do want to answer shortly, Deborah. Deborah has the question: is the union of the masculine, feminine, and its highest pure frequency the undivided God? I'll give each one of you an answer.
Yes. I would say yes.
That was quick.
Jim says yes. John?
no. It just don't happen like that. You got to work your way to it.
Does it happen like that? It said, is that the highest frequency?
I'm not going to say yes.
The Russells would use the term the voidance of the masculine feminine in our nature invites the reality of divinity in. So when the two void each other out through loving interaction, and the tensions and the imbalances go away, that's within yourself, within your marriage, within your family, within your community. It's a process, but it's the voidance of each. When one is allowed to exist at the expense of the other, feminine at the expense of the male, male at the expense of the feminine, this creates the disruptions and balances in life. So this is what John's talking about when he says, go to source and continue to try to make that contact. That's why the Russells say at the very beginning of the course, the most important thing you can do is meditate and pray daily and regularly, whether you light up with light or not. Just do it, because you're transforming your thinking by doing that. And
Okay.
that's
all right. So we are having a great conversation here tonight. So my panel, we are going to be going to the bottom of 211. I think it's important to land the concept of balanced interchange in our conversation tonight. So please know we're jumping ahead. For everybody else that's tuning in, just breathe it in, breathe in the love, knowing that there's something very special here for you. We're taking a 3-minute break. We'll see you shortly.
I'm gonna get you on the way back, Monzel.
All right, buddy.
Okay, man.
All right, if you'll find your way back. So as we're having our panel join us again, I want to ground us all back to the fact that this is, in fact, a home study course. And there is a reason for that. We are simply a panel that is offering you insights, but the real journey is for you to go within through meditation and stillness and receive the answers. So when you have questions like many of these things, write them on your heart and the answers will come forth to you. So I want to be really, really clear that that was part of our great debate as we go to the full panel here, is that how do we do this awaken your inner genius in a way that is loving and supportive of you, but still guiding you on your own path. Is that a fair way to state it, John?
Yes, the Russell said that when you have God as your teacher, you need no earthly teachers.
Okay. So I want to make that really clear for all of us, because these lessons, we were debating, wow, we really should have even done this twice a week. There's just so much to cover in each one of these lessons. And if you don't yet have your home study course, we want to encourage you to go to the link below and get a copy of your home study course. This is a gift. Don't worry about all the stuff that's happening in the world here for the rest of this fall. The best way to do it is opt out and just focus on your spiritual development and how you end up bringing that light further into yourself. So let me go ahead and have us jump in. It was the biggest challenge with each one of these lessons was where do I go as a facilitator? Because you see the wealth of knowledge that's here on the screen, and I have such a tremendous respect for all of them. But I did think this one, I was being led that this was very important for us to land. And so, James, if we could go to the bottom of page 211, and there's several things I want to bring up. It says, "We shall now carry the simile of music still further for your great understanding of the principles which apply throughout all nature. In making this next step, we will add another word to the three basic words of creation, which we formerly gave as the undivided, the divided, and the united." Okay, so really important to have those three words in your head. "These are the basic words of the creative process, for they constitute the cycle of motion. There is another word which is not part of motion, for it does not move. It controls all motion, however, and higher knowledge demands full and complete comprehension of its controlling power over all creation. By adding the word balance, we now have four words which constitute the basis of creation: the undivided, the divided, the united, and balance, or more specifically, balanced interchange between pairs." And let me go on. "This is so vital to a principle that we could well generalize all actions in the universe by saying that all actions which are rhythmically balanced are good and perfect, and that all we call bad, all ills, all hurtful things, all wars, failures, bankruptcies, divorces, frustrations, and other unbalanced rhythms of man or nature, and all things else which prevent man or nations of man to achieve prosperity," scroll up, James, "peace and happiness are the result of the unbalanced mating of divided pairs." So let's stop right here. Can you all comment on this big idea that's now being landed of balance? Who wants to start?
Balance, the other word for balance is love. So we've been dancing all around it. But a balanced transaction, that's when they discuss in earlier chapters, they discuss that give and re-give. Give and re-give is love. It's love in action. The centering point between give and re-give is balance. You start from the united, universal one at balance. You go to the central in-breath. At rest, you have balance. And then you return that out again to the universal one. Give, re-give. We want to start educating ourselves to think give, re-give. Not good, bad, not evil, give, re-give. So when we look at a situation where what we would perceive as harmful or unbalanced or poisonous or any one of the 1,000 other words that means imbalance, we realize that these are people individually and collectively creating thoughts and actions that manifest as imbalance. This is a school for learning how not to do that. And
Okay.
It makes it easier not to be judgmental. I mean, we all have our moments. Not to be judgmental against the world controllers because they're too in a learning process. And remember, they couldn't have the control that they have if we collectively didn't give it to them. So we have to understand that the way to resolve those big world issues is to not give these people that do unbalanced acts and thoughts power. And that's a learning process in humanity.
All right, John, Ken, who wants to go first and talk? Who wants to go next talking about balance?
Well, I'll
ahead,
jump
Ken.
in here. Balance is something you can know, but you cannot see. Right? You only know when you're out of balance. You don't know when you're in balance. You're in a normal state. So balance is actually normalcy, quite frankly. So an imbalanced interchange, when anybody takes more than they give, as Mr. Bonzo talks about, so does Mr. Porter, you leave a residue. There's a residue effect, an ill effect. A residue is an ill effect. That means baggage. That means that there's been an imbalance. So balance also is along with some other words we're going to learn about, are things you can know but you cannot see. So staying in balance. How many times do we hear as people talk about, you're out of balance, get yourself back in balance, especially with children. A child's gone out of balance. Well, you can only see when it's gone out of balance. When it's in balance, again, it's a state of normalcy. So it is normal to have balance in our life. It's a quality we should all strive for. In learning to see with the inner eyes, an imbalanced interchange doesn't mean I have to necessarily, like Jim said, correct someone or go after someone that's doing wrong things. I just need to know that I'm affected and patterned by my environment. So if someone's out of balance, they can knock any one of us out of balance. So it's so important to maintain a balanced state and to be around balanced individuals, to have balance in your work, your personal and your emotional life, and your thought life, right? You can see how balance is so critical to have a balanced life. It becomes why isn't there more focus on how do I stay balanced and how do I develop an awareness of when I'm not in balance? And I know that, we're talking about a little bit of this God thing in terms of inviting, is there has to be a total dependency. That's what John Bonzo was talking about, I believe, is that we have to become totally dependent on our higher frequency, the highest frequency within us, which is the God frequency, which is the undivided frequency of knowing. Like balance, you can know, but you can't see. Beauty, you can know, but you can't see. So these are things, some more qualities will come up as we go along about the things of why, and everything's interchanging, which we talked about. Everything is reproducing itself and every other thing at the speed of 186,000 miles per second, which man calls the speed of light. We refer to it as the speed of reproduction. Another way of stating that is a person, I'll end on this, my little love, a person that spends 20 years on the ocean, then comes to the land, they don't get land fever. They're just patterned by the ocean. Same thing happens when you're around unbalanced people. They will pattern you. And it's something that I had to learn, that it's a lot easier to pull someone down than it is to pick someone up, especially if they don't have any willingness, right? If you try and help someone that doesn't want to help themselves, you got to get out of it. That's an unbalanced situation, which will leave a residue effect. Go ahead, John.
All right, so John, before you jump in, I want to ask the audience, please, to go ahead and place in the chat box, when have you experienced unbalance in your life? Has it been when you've been too consumed by fear, too consumed with security? Is it that you don't have enough physical motion versus stillness in your life? Is it that you have too much tech versus not enough meditation, busyness versus stillness? I mean, what is it? So as we're talking about this issue of balance, I think it's really important that we all share some examples of us or the world being out of balance. John, what's your conversation?
Here's what I would like to say. Now, most of the discussion around this word has been attached to emotion. And that's just one aspect of it, okay? But I will say this. Leo gave Jim and I that word as the basis of everything. And if I could, I would say that's probably the one word that guides me daily throughout the day. Every decision I make, every action that I take. Because here's the result of a balanced decision or a balanced relationship, or if you're decorating a room, if things are in balance, right? It doesn't bring you back to it. You move on to the next thing, right? But if something is out of balance, it catches your eye, right?
Yep.
So you have to make a conscious decision to make a change, to balance it. But I'm trying to read my own word here. So another word for balance, let people think of the word symmetry. Think about it. We got two eyes and we got two ears and two nostrils and two lungs and so on and so forth. And when you see leaves of a tree and you see how they come out in pairs, one on each side, and just look for symmetry in life and in nature, and that will help you understand how critical balance is. So yes, you can emotionally be out of balance and so on, but it applies to everything in life. So when you seek balance, you're seeking peace, you're seeking tranquility. And I know you guys like throwing that love word around all the time, but that is the end result. It's a loving thing salt. Because yes.
Talk about salt. How is salt balanced? What is the balance? What is salt? Tell us about the balance of salt.
The balance of salt, sodium, chlorine, both of them will kill you. Put them together and there is no sodium in it and there's no chlorine in it. It's a new element, but it forms a perfect cube. And that perfect cube is balance. And anything after a cube, Jim talks about the carbon octave all the time, right? 6-sided, that's the cube. And once you get beyond carbon in the chemical world, in the elemental world, then you'll see things become multi-sided. And the Russells are going to get into that later on and so on. So if you want to see something out of balance, all right, you got to know what you're looking for.
Very good.
Okay. All right. So I would like to go over here to the middle of page 212. And so this is a really, really deep lesson, but this was important because they go right there. It said we're axioms. The undivided is eternally balanced, for it is one. Let's just start there. Anything need to be said? The undivided is eternally balanced, for it is one. Self-explanatory, John?
Pretty much.
I think
All
so.
right.
Saying God.
Okay. The divided one is eternally the divided one is eternally unbalanced, for it becomes two. What needs to be said there?
So just know that the two now have been created from the one, from the balance situation. Now the two out here, all right, are in a state of tension, in a state of motion. All right. So they're divided. They're out here doing their own thing. So you just have to kind of hold on to that.
The
All right, go
united,
ahead.
okay. The united two can become a balanced one only if each mate of the two is equal.
Equal.
Right.
Hence all the problems
so
of humanity.
To your seesaw, Kimberly, right? You got, so if one side of the seesaw is heavier than the other, right? That will not be a rhythmic balanced interchange because one side is going to weigh the other one down. But the closer you get to equilibrium, then you can have that beautiful rhythmic 1-2 motion of up, down, right? And then remember this, those two will eventually become zero. They will become stillness at that point of equilibrium.
Okay. All right.
Like
Very powerful. Very powerful. Let's continue. And it says a balanced unity is possible only where interchange between the mate pairs of every transaction of man or nature is equal and rhythmic. Equal and rhythmic. We shall now apply the foregoing axioms and principles to such human transactions as music, individual and national relations, sex, industry, and other examples necessary to enable you to fully comprehend where the physical expression ends in all such transactions and the spiritual expression begins. Okay, so stop there for a moment. So make this real for me, panel. Make this very real for me.
I encourage you to read the next paragraph, and then I think we can make it real.
All right. So we begin with sound itself. Sound is created by a collision between two states of motion or conditions of matter. We now consider the creator of the sound. Man, for example, is the creator of the drum beat, the chant, the march, the waltz, jazz, choral, or symphony. No matter which status of physical or spiritual expression that comes from the creator of sound, there's something else than soul within the sound, which is not part of the sound itself, a something else which is not created. And that something is rhythm. There are other uncreated qualities within sound, also such as beauty, which inner eyes and inner vision alone can see. But for the present, we shall consider only rhythm. All right, make this real, our panel.
No, that was beautiful because again, those qualities we can know but we cannot see, and everything has a rhythm. Every conversation, you walk into a room where two people are talking, there's an actual rhythm going on. If you're a third wheel and you come in and they're having a quiet conversation, you're very loud, you've disrupted that rhythm. If you want to be synergetic, you're going to come in with the same rhythm. So rhythm is something that permeates every area of life. Everything, a car has a rhythm, an individual has a rhythm. We call that a spirit within, a countenance. There's rhythm to our demeanor. There's rhythm to our thinking. There's rhythm to everything we do. So it's a quality that am I being rhythmic right now? It's a great checkpoint of where I'm at. Am I in a balanced state? Is my interchange balanced with the world that I live in? Am I harboring good thoughts right now? Am I having good feelings as a byproduct of those good thoughts? And am I taking rhythmic, balanced interchange actions? Right? Are my actions rhythmic? Are my thoughts rhythmic, and are my feelings rhythmic? And remember, it's a thought wave universe, so it starts with thought. It does start with thought. We've got to get our thoughts balanced, and they need to have rhythm. It's such an important quality. So, we call it the RBI, rhythmic balanced interchange. Interchange is not there yet, but it's coming.
All right. So as you all dive into that, I want to ask James to go ahead to the bottom of 221. We'll have a discussion about whether we want to have this lesson go on even further, but I do want to show this image to everybody because that's what you just brought up was the wave, the bottom of 221. And so, John, if you would go scroll down quite a bit, James, the bottom of 221. And this is a visual. Keep going. You're going to wait until you see the image of the waves. And so this whole thing is they give us, all right, there it is. They give us descriptions of music and rhythmic balance. And so, John, why don't you comment on this? And then I'm going to ask Jim, what is it that we're seeing a diagram of here on the bottom of page 221?
Okay, so we got to keep it to topic, which is rhythm. So everything, every pulse has a rhythm. So the universal rhythm, the universal heartbeat is a 1-2 pulse, that rhythm. Bump, 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 bump. Okay. We go to B. A waltz rhythm has a third beat to it. Just look at it. You see the three things, right?
Yep.
All right. So a waltz rhythm is the one that you want to move to. Now you're out of balance. And so that third beat wants to put you in motion. Whereas the universal rhythm keeps you in stillness. You don't need to tap your feet to it. You're not going to want to clap your hands or get up and jump. And then the jazz rhythm, you can see how unsynchronous that beat is. All right. So those people that are attracted to that jazz rhythm, and you go further that is the more physically based individual that if you played a classical piece of music that you see in A, it'll drive them crazy. Even my own mom, one time I played Mozart for her, and she said, Johnny, could you turn that noise off?
Well, so let's talk about that.
I'm trying to give you a practical. Yes, I'm trying to give you a practical example of those that, so her rhythm was not that universal rhythm, and it was uncomfortable to them. And just like for me, to put me in that jazz rhythm, I would go nuts. I'd put a gun to my head and blow my head off. I wouldn't
All
be
right.
able to
Well,
take it.
so I want to mention to everybody. So this is important because I think you'll find that a lot of people that are growing in their spiritual awareness, they desire less noise because of this. They desire
Yeah.
less noise and more peace. This is why we do our meditations to the universal heartbeat of the ocean, because that is the natural rhythmic balance. It even, if you go back to that lovely scene in Dirty Dancing where Patrick Swayze was trying to teach her to dance, and he was trying to get her to dance to that 1-2 beat of the heart. Okay, go right back to that moment of, when he was talking about my dance space and your dance space. So the world, which you're talking about, John, when we're out of sync with that rhythmic balance interchange, that's when we're living in a distorted world that is not balanced, correct?
Yes. We'll leave it there. Yes.
Ken?
Yeah, one of the things that I think is so important about the rhythm, if you think about just listening to rap music all day long, and you can imagine, like John's saying, that what's going on in that human being is there's no peace. It's all that chaotic rhythm is going on inside. So even when the music's off, that frequency is still within that being if you record that. And now that doesn't mean there isn't a place for the waltz and there isn't even a place for jazz. So there are places that you can enjoy that to give that physical stimulation, but know that that's what you're doing is if you're looking at to dance, then that's a physical stimulation. So that has an appropriate sound to it. But if we just subject ourselves to listening to TV in the background and keeping the news on, and those are unrhythmic frequencies that are like this jazz music that sit inside you, and they just keep that rattle noise, and why you're never settled. Why, when you take a walk in the woods, you can get that peace of mind. It's never, nature is tonal. It's not melodic. So when we hear the ocean, that's not a tone. What John is referring to in the 1-2 is like Rockabye Baby. That's melodic. There's a 1-2 beat that's melodic, and there's a 1-2 that's tonal. So nature is tonal. Go ahead,
John, and then I have a comment.
So
John,
if you wanted to measure what we're speaking of, and just like Ken said, so for the last 25 years, rap music has been the most popular music throughout the world.
Yep.
When's the last time you saw a beautiful symphony broadcast?
That's right.
Right? So that is a measuring stick of where we are as a society, as a human race, right? Is that if that is your thing, if that's your go-to, that's fine. There's no right, wrong. There's no good, bad, whatever. But I'm just saying that's it. But it's a measuring stick of where you are individually and collectively.
Yeah.
Well, one thing you can look at, I think, is a really good example is rap stars are making billions of dollars, but you take a classical pianist or concerto or an opera singer, and they're traveling around the world just to survive. You know what I mean? And if they don't even have to sell out at times, which we read about, we missed that paragraph, but about how Leo was relating to some of these orchestra leaders and some pianists that tried to make some more fame by being on TV. But in order to do that, they had to lower their standards and change the melodic tempo so that it was more of a circus show rather than the classical 1-2 beat of stimulation that awakens the genius. You listen, we have an example of that at James Brady in the second unit that we talk about, where he started listening to classical music and it changed his whole life. This was a jazz musician that started listening to classical music, and it literally awakened that light in him. That music awakened something in him. So we all have it. We're all ready to wake up to that next level. I really do believe that is the desire of all of us, is to know rhythmic balance interchange as a way of life.
I have a thought, but Jackie, you wanted to chime in.
Well, back to when Ken was talking about, and John kind of touched on it, is that whatever we're into, whatever we're doing in our physical lives, is our degree of awareness of divinity. And it doesn't mean it can't change in an instant for somebody, like you're talking about listening to classical music, that can change their life. I blew out my car speakers listening to Beethoven's Fifth, and I couldn't listen to it quietly. I had to blast it, and that was my inspiration. But it's sad I have to replace my speakers. But that that uplifted me in that point of where I am, even to deal with the underlying things that I'm not so great at dealing with using my divinity. I guess you know what I'm talking about. It's just not connected. And
Yes.
when you can listen to a piece that can connect you, then you realize your place in divinity with yourself.
Well, and it's very important for us all to remember that there has been a very purposeful intent for the noise to become more noisy, the world to become more noisy for us in the past 50 years. So with the onslaught of television, and then please understand that news did not go 24 hours until 1980 when CNN first started to broadcast 24 hours. There was a time when the news channels were not 24 hours. Since then, I have watched the noise level in airports, in malls, everywhere we go. We are being assaulted with noise to be able to push us out of this balance that we're talking about here, so that we would become less and less able to hear with our inner ears and see with our inner eyes. And so when you understand this, that this idea, people will ask me when I travel, do you ever, I don't even know how to turn on a TV now. I don't watch television. I haven't in 10 years. I am very careful about how I stay in tune with the silence of the rhythmic balance interchange of the universe, of what do I allow into my universe. And even with social media or videos, I don't listen to the sound until I know that energetically it is a match for me. So I want to just say to everyone who's listening here is that ask yourself, how comfortable are you with silence? How comfortable are you listening to the gorgeous symphony of the ocean that's giving you this rhythmic balance right there as the universal heartbeat? And that was actually why I opted to be able to start us with that, because I think that when we don't understand that our ability to understand that divinity within each of us is within our ability for what we're talking about here tonight, I think it's a real missed opportunity for our spiritual expansion. Does that resonate, everyone?
Absolutely.
Okay. So yes, John.
Exactly. I was going to say the word that came to me as you were delivering that was to be exalted, and Jackie referenced that. That ending to Beethoven's Fifth is tremendous. It will exalt you.
Yes.
It will exalt you to a higher understanding.
Yes, it will. Rita brings up a great point as James pulls that on the screen. I've been listening to classical music that is set to 432 hertz instead of 440 hertz. I often tune into a variety of hertz music to be able to recalibrate and balance. So our whole world really is out of balance. And part of the big game that we're all in is being able to find that balance, that rhythmic balance interchange, understanding the principles that we have here, and be able to rise above all of the noise, all of the chaos. Because when we're able to do that, it's a beautiful thing. And when we each become more balanced in our abilities, then we create a more balanced world. Isn't that why we're doing this, to my fellow panelists?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I always want to make everybody realize, it was so important for me to know, and it is important to this day to know that my God knows exactly where I'm at and would never ask of me more than I'm capable of giving. So you are right where you're supposed to be, and no matter, I haven't been studying it that long, I haven't listened to classical music that long. Start right now. Everything is always about the now. The change happens now. If you aren't changing now, then you aren't changing. Tomorrow will never come. It's always about the now, right? I got to reach and have that relationship with God now. And even though, and this is such an eloquent way that this is being laid out, the brushstrokes of what God is omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent, which is, again, over and over again articulated that way, that all of that centers in us. So, but it is, like John said, it's a building of a relationship. It's an integration of something into your life, but it starts right now. But so don't pressure yourself like, I'm not getting the full whammy. The light's not on. It isn't a measurement thing. It's just about a desiring thing. The more you desire that relationship, the more you have that relationship.
Every moment's an opportunity.
Yes, it is.
Kim, can you pull the remember? Yeah. That centering ball,
seesaw to me.
That centering ball is you. It is the fulcrum. It is stillness. It's your one true reality. But we get lost in the embodiment, the back and forth seesaw of life. Yep. So what we're all saying and what the Russells are saying is, if you want to get back to the one source that controls all embodiment. It's centered within you. It's always present, and that's divinity.
You know,
All
one
right.
thing about that seesaw too, that I'll finish on that, is remember the piston stroke's got to move, so you got to take action. And so there is action. You can't just sit in an equilibrium state. That's not what we're saying. We're saying
Right.
that a balanced interchange is what we're looking for. Stop getting out of balance and being, oh, you know, I'm too low or I'm too high. It's about finding that balance. If I'm up, I want to make sure I saturate back into levelness. If I'm down, I want to bring it back up into levelness. But you can't just stay there. It's not about being stoic. That's not what anybody's saying. We got to create. That's part of that creating process.
Beautifully said. So here it is that we're going to go to our visual journey. So here's the thing. Karen is still working on our visual journey for Unit 3. So for this moment, we're going to go to a quick visual journey from our last unit. It will begin to make a lot more sense to you as things are coming along. When we come back, we will answer any questions that you have. And if there are none, then we'll wrap it up. But just sit back, relax, take a break if you need to, and just drink in the visual journeys that we've been on since Unit 2. All right. So our panelist, Karen Elkin, does that as a gift for us throughout our year. She is, while she studied the Russell work, that she is new to the home study course. And so she is at the point where she gives us as a gift as we go through. And I hope as you're listening and you're watching it, that more and more of this becomes a little more palpable and understood. It's like layers, John. That's what I found about the Russell work. It's like layers, is that as your consciousness and awareness grows, you understand more and more. Is that fair to say? John, come off mute. Jim, everybody come off mute.
Peeling them back.
Peeling it back. Peeling it back. Absolutely. So I have lots of hellos and lots of comments there in the chat box. But do we have any questions here as we're wrapping up? We wanted to see if there are any questions before we make a few announcements. As we're waiting for the questions, if any of our panelists have any thoughts about what else you would encourage people to look at here in lesson 11, we will only be able to just cover the surface of it. Anything else that you want to encourage people to go read on their own or comment that needs to be said here as we wait for any final questions?
Yeah, I like the last paragraph on 220. Would be a great one to end on. Do you mind if I read it?
Go right ahead. We'll pull it up.
Says, you can see by the tremendous residue of unbalance there is in every human life and every human institution how very primate the human race is and how far it is from even an approach to unity. And remember, unity is impossible without balanced rhythmic interchange between every transaction of life. That's the key. Balanced rhythmic interchange in every transaction. And thinking is a transaction between you and the source, or between you and your sense self. Which one do you want, right? The sense self is never satisfied. It's insatiable. You're at the mercy of the beats, the rhythms around you. And then your undivided self is a relationship you can have, which we, call divine or God or creation or creator. I call it God. And that's what it had to become for me. But I have a very personal relationship with what I call God, and it is and also that same God is within every human being, and the same amount is in every human being, and that's when you really enter into a good state in life, where even with some people that are living imbalanced and not necessarily living a very balanced rhythmic interchange life, you still need to know that the same amount of God is in them that is in you. It's just not awakened yet.
Well, and I think that's an important thing for everybody to ask themselves as we're wrapping up here is, where are you out of balance in your life? Are you spending too much time alone and too little time with people? Are you spending too much time with people and not enough time alone? Where is more balance being called for in your life? And I find that when we actually bring in these lessons into life, it makes everything flow in a much more glorious way. Any other final comments before I make announcements as we wrap up here? Jim, Jackie?
Okay. The only thing I would say is just remember is don't get, like John says, don't get ahead of yourself. We're going to come into some complicated stuff, but just take what you can for right now and absorb what you can right now without trying to overthink it.
All right.
Quantity.
So I'm going to ask James to pull up our upcoming events. Here we are, just a couple of thoughts coming in. I know some of you asked about posters. You can order posters at philosophy.org, the copies of the illustrations of these, which many Russell students have. I would like to invite everybody that I will be speaking at the museum next Saturday. We'll go on to the next one. So when I first came in, that was my picture on the left. That was one of the things that I had a photo with a spear long before I ever learned of the Russell work. And John said it must have been meant for me to come there. So I am in a transition myself from just even with my hair, but I'll be talking about cosmic romance, an invitation for greater love in your life. And I will be talking not only about the romance, cosmic romance between Walter and Leo. I will be sharing a lot of details about Ken and myself, and I will be documenting the telepathic element of even our journey to make it very real for people, and understanding that the things that we were taught aren't real actually are. So I invite you all, because what's most important is, how do you bring more love into your life? There are several events coming up, which you can certainly find out more. And then we'll be here again next Sunday with another gift of love. August 25th, we'll be doing the lesson 12 of Unit 3. We'll be covering the Q&A of the Russell students. Margaret Rue, who lived with Walter and Leo, you heard her just a few weeks ago, is going to join us. And then in September, we'll be diving into Unit 4. But before we finish up, I wanted to ask James to come off mute and come on screen. And if we could just have a brief conversation, I'm going to ask both James and Ken to comment just a bit about what they saw at Tesla Tech. So Tesla Tech, we actually had a booth for Awaken Your Inner Genius. We had t-shirts and brochures and materials. And so James, you came with your son, Dalton, who was 15, who was also helping us do a lot of the social media. What was your perspective and what was exciting for you to see about the Awaken Your Inner Genius movement?
So it was exciting to enjoy that experience with my son. A lot of what is being talked about here is having an idea and a vision for something and bringing that into reality. So I didn't even know that we were going to have a booth there. So when I got there and I walked in to the ballroom and I saw that there was a booth with the big Awaken Your Inner Genius sign and everything laid out, it was really cool to see a physical representation of all the things that we've been doing digitally. So one of my first jobs was actually as a trade show coordinator. So it's, similar in that there were a bunch of different booths. So it kind of felt like I was stepping back into an old world, but with a more advanced version of myself, tapped into something that was exciting and fun and fulfilling. And then to be able to share that with my son was awesome. I'm hoping he'll catch the bug for some of the stuff. But while we were there, I enjoyed the speakers, and probably what I enjoyed more was the excitement and curiosity that people had for the Russell Works. People would come up and ask different questions. Some people were like, is any of this even useful? Which was an interesting question because how do you answer that kind of question? So my go-to was, if you find the intersection between philosophy and technology interesting, philosophy and science and spirituality interesting, then this is for you. So it was just cool to see everybody intrigued by it and the curiosity that it inspired, and it felt like it gave me a real life version, a real life look at what we're actually doing.
I love it. Thank you, James. And Ken, you were there. You were an incredible asset there at the booth, of course, as a 30-year student. You were also incredibly supportive of me as I spoke on the agenda. But what did you notice about our time together with this sharing with people about this whole message?
I noticed that there was a lot of kooky. No, I'm just kidding. There's a lot of people that were of the light, and that's what I thought was cool, is that there was people actually gathered together for the betterment of humanity, even to the simplest person. That's what they were there for. Whether their agenda is not up to me. That's between them and their creator. But I will say that it was really nice to see that all of it was about bettering ourselves, bettering humanity, a healthier life. And the reality of it is that ever more and more is spirituality becoming the primary spearhead for evolution as opposed to materialism. It's still conflicted, don't get me wrong, but as it's read about in this particular unit, and Leah was referring to, now we have, hundreds of thousands of people waking up. And now I would be even venture to say after 70 plus years later, we're probably looking at millions and millions of people now waking up. So this is a time I really got out of it that we're into something. I was like with James, people really responded to Awakening Your Inner Genius. It almost, and it's a weird way, and I don't want to say this like in a better way, but it seemed as though that our booth superseded all the other gimmicks and gadgets, and there were a lot of gimmicks and gadgets, and some of them were brilliant and cool. But what they didn't have was that inner relationship, that inner working of how to be a better person, live a fuller life, and to rise to your fullest potential. We were the ones doing that. So there's not a lot of this out there, guys. There's not a lot of paradigms, not a lot of way of life that people are teaching, a theological way of life that are practical, right? The practicality of spirituality is that it's in print, and it's here in a 1-year home study course. And 1 year is 4 seasons, which represents, our lives are made up of annual events. So if you think about it, you just start today, and then a year later you've done it, and you can't imagine what you're going to be like if you just measured today from a year from now and embarked on this. How much will change in your life, and how much you feel more connected. And that's what I like too, is it connecting to those kind of people, but really seeing people respond to this message. That was beautiful.
Ken, you made me think of something when you were talking about how it seemed like people are waking up and coming to the light. I didn't realize that Tesla Tech had been going on for like 30 years or however long. So a lot of the ideas that were presented, a lot of even the ideas that we discuss here 10, 20 years ago, they weren't anywhere near mainstream ideas. And it was interesting to hear what people were talking about and recognizing that some of these are closer to the mainstream and they're more widely accepted as at least a possibility than they would have been 10 or 20 years ago.
Well, and there were people who had to be bold and courageous to speak up about these ideas a long time ago, and even more and more now. People who left their careers that have been in healthcare for 45 years, who have been in manufacturing for 30 years, who have been in some of these industries that says there have to be a better way. So I saw an enormous amount of love at that event. I want to say a gracious thank you to everybody. We had the chance to do a booth at the last minute, so that was one of those things. And I want to say thank you to everyone who's listening. You are part of this co-creation that we're doing here together. And so while I'm excited that this is literally the eve of my 3-year anniversary running across the Russell work, who knew what was going to come forth for that day? And so I have a great deal of love and support for all of our folks that are on the panel, including Joey, who's behind the scenes, who's also helping us. Everyone who's listening here and in the future, please understand how important you are to all of us. Please continue to ask questions, comment on social media, reach out to us, let us know your thoughts. We want to be here to serve you. We have some incredible things ahead. And remember that each day you make a choice about opening up that beautiful light even brighter. And so a gracious thank you to you all. We've come to the end of our time here for this evening. We're not going to say goodbye. We will say until next time. So see you all next Sunday.
And I want to say one thing before you go. I want to encourage everyone to bring questions at the beginning of next week. Ask your questions from the unit you just read. It really helps us to find out what you're hearing and not hearing, and maybe even give us some ideas of what more we could talk about.
All right, everyone. Take care.